Alright, here's how we get started with Lightroom. First thing you want to do is you want to bring in your files. First thing you want to do is you want to ingest your files. So you need to do, on the desktop, you need to create a new folder, and then you need to copy the files from your SD card into that new folder. Then in Lightroom, you'll open Lightroom, and you're going to go to File, Import Photos and Video. Now up here, it's very important that you select copy. You want to make a copy so that those files stay on the SD card. If you move them, then there's no backup. So copy is the best practice. Then you come over here, you navigate, you find your files. So here's my files. And then you'd set a location where they're going to be saved, which is back to the folder that you just made. Then once you do that, you hit the import button. Down here, I've already done that, so we don't have to necessarily go ahead and do that. So once your files are imported, they'll be down here. You want to that's your library. Now to work on them, you want to go to Develop. So we're going to Develop. So we're going to work on this file first. So the first thing that we'd want to do once we get into the Develop tab is we'd want to crop. So if there's any kind of cropping, like let's make this more of a close-up. So you come over here to your cropping tool and you want to set your aspect ratio. So normally for film, the aspect ratio is 3:2. So we just come over here and we'd look for 3:2. So here's 3:2, or 2:3 in this case. So we'd go 3:2, and that gives us a aspect ratio to work with that'll match like if you wanted to print out or something. And then you can just crop. So we're going to make this a portrait. So we'll kind of crop down a little bit. There is the rule of thirds here. So you can kind of put the eyes on the rule of thirds. We need the gray card in there. So that's kind of where we're going to go. So then I'd hit return. Now we're going to color correct. Now, normally what you want to do is you always want to use a gray card when you shoot your first shot in a new lighting situation. So in this case, we were in the studio. So we shot a picture with the gray card. And now what you do to set your color balance is you're going to come over here and you're looking for the eyedropper next to white balance. You take that eyedropper and you just click on the gray card, and that sets your color balance. So you can, if you looked really close, you can see it shift a little bit. Now if you don't have a gray card, then you can come over here and you can set it to your lighting situation. So like daylight or whatever, or when in doubt, just pick auto. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to work on our exposure. So if you use the gray card on your camera, then your exposure is set. And if you didn't use the gray card, then what you've got to do is you've got a couple of adjustments that you can make. That's why we're shooting a raw file. So to start off with, you're going to kind of use the histogram over here, and it will help you to kind of see where things are. So like right here, you've got a white triangle. That shows that your whites are overexposed, or what they call clipped, and so you need to pull those back. So you can click on this triangle and you can click on this triangle, and it'll show you where things are overexposed, or what we would call clipped. So we'll start with the highlights, and we just move the slider and we can see the highlights move away. So now the highlights are gone. So our highlights are pretty good. Now the next thing we want to work on are the blacks. So the blacks are in pretty good shape. You don't see any blue that shows the blacks, but if you brought the blacks over, you'd see the blue start to creep in. So we don't have any, we have nice blacks. We were just a little overexposed on our whites. And then finally for the whites, we already kind of fixed that with the highlighting tool, but we can work on our whites a little bit in the same idea. There's our whites, and we just pull those out. So now we've got a pretty, you can see here our blacks are a little bit too dark, so we can pull them back a little bit. Now we don't have an alarm. We have an alarm on our whites, so we'll pull our whites back a little bit. So our next step is tonal range, and what tonal range does is it kind of sets the contrast. And so we want to contrast the white from the black. So to do that, we come over here, and the little trick is just to double click on the whites and double click on the blacks, and that'll kind of set your contrast for you as far as the way the colors pop. And you can always go down here to this controlling contrast, and you can kind of slide it to how you like it to look. So, and then the next thing you do is you want to do your lens correction. So we'll go to lens correction. We're going to turn on enable profile, and then it'll tell you what lens we were using, and it corrects. So if the lens has any distortion, it takes the lens out. For retouching, we use a couple of different shots. The first one is to remove noise. Now what noise is when you use a high ISO, the pixels start to show up. So the idea would be it would look something like this. If you look, you can actually see little dots there, little pixels. That normally happens in low light. And so what you do to get rid of those pixels in, like, say the whole picture, or let's just say you wanted to correct the pixels on the dog or on the tracks or something like that, is you use the adjustment brush. So you take the adjustment brush, and then there are presets for the adjustment brush. So the one you would want would be noise. And then you take the brush, you can make the brush really big, and then you can paint all around the dog, and it will show you, it will kind of take away the noise. Now, if you want to see where you've painted, you can click down here, and then it shows you how you've taken where you have painted, so you could go back and work on the shot. But that's kind of the basic way that you get rid of noise. So noise is really important, like if you're shooting indoors, anything with a high ISO, low light, you get noise, and so you'd want to remove the noise. And that our next shot is where we want to remove blemishes. So for that, we're going to use the healing tool. So we'll click on the healing tool, and you can set it to clone or heal. We want to heal. And so what we can do is we can take out, like a blemish, in this case like this birthmark. So we just kind of set the brush and we click over it, and then it's going to draw from a spot on the photo. And so if you don't want it to draw particularly from the front of her nose, you can pull it up here onto her forehead and kind of get a sample, kind of the same skin samples. You can do that here, pull it over to where it's kind of in the same area, and then now we have taken care of the blemishes. Now the other thing you might want to do is soften the skin. So if we look really close, let's get out of this tool. So if we look really close, we can see she's got some rough skin. So maybe we want to soften that skin up. So we come back over here to the adjustment tool, and then this time, instead of getting rid of noise, we'd want to select soften skin. And then we can make sure that the show selected map overlay is on, and then we can start working on the skin to soften up the skin. So like here on the forehead, down on the nose, under the eyes, around there. I might want to shrink my brush down a little bit, get over the eyes. And then finally what we would do is we would file, and we're going to export. And there's a bunch of settings. You probably want to set it to the folder that you're working on. So you set to the folder you're working, set it to that new folder that you make. You don't have to rename it if you don't want to. And then your file type will normally be JPEG, quality 100%, and you can sharpen it for the screen. And then you'd say export, and away goes your files. And then you can turn them in.